Southridge Church, the pastor of this growing church in San Jose. And thanks for sitting down with us. I just want to get your perspective, a godly view on what's going on in our culture, this wild time that we're under, persecution against the church that we've never seen before.
Yes.
Could you give me just a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure.
How long you've been a pastor?
Yep.
Your family, so forth.
Yeah. So my dad started ministry here in the Bay Area, was a youth pastor in Santa Clara, and so I kind of grew up in ministry. He's currently still a pastor. I have an older brother who's also a pastor. All my siblings, we all went to a Bible college. We were all theologically trained, and about 2007, I got offered a job back in San Jose, so moved back to San Jose and worked for 7 years as an assistant pastor. And then in 2013, I felt the call to plant a church. So my wife and I, we started to work towards planting our own church here in South San Jose. And we've been on that journey for almost 7 years now, planting a church.
7 years.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, and then this year happened, So it's been a wild ride, but it's been good. God's been good.
Well, I'd like to hear your story in this pandemic. Like when it first started, what did you think? How did you respond? And then as it's unfolded over these months, here we're, 5 months into it now. I'd like to hear your thoughts at how it developed through the whole thing.
Yeah, well, initially, my initial reaction, our church has never owned a building, so we were always portable, but our church wanted to just keep meeting. But the high school we were meeting at was one of the first to close, even before there was the shelter-in-place order. So then we went to a hotel ballroom, we met there for 1 week, and then that got closed, and then everywhere we tried to meet, it got closed, because Hebrews does say, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together as manner some is, but so much the more is see the day approaching. And so I just had that strong conviction that we should still meet. But then because we were portable, we saw everything shutting down. And then I'm connected with a lot of pastors, a lot of church planters, and they all said, hey, they're asking us to take a 2-3 week break. And that was the let's flatten the curve. Let's just take 2-3 weeks. Let's go through March, and then we'll revisit this, and by Easter we'll all be open. And so we were like, okay, we can go online, we can do that type of thing. And at first, since we've been portable for 7 years, our setup teardown crew, our volunteers were like, hey, 3 weeks, this is great, we're moving online. We get to catch our breath because, it would take us 4 or 5 hours to set up for a church service that lasts an hour and a half, 2 hours to tear it all down, and then you do it again 6 days later. So it's a lot of work, and a lot of wear and tear. So we kind of were excited about this new opportunity, but then shortly thereafter, you just saw, wait a minute, this is not going to go away anytime soon. You heard the NBA shutting down their season. And so initially, you don't know what to think because there's so many conflicting reports. So you're just trying to say, okay, well, let's I'm sure the mass consensus, this thing's going to be really bad. But then as we got closer and closer to Easter, our church was like, wait a minute, why don't we do drive-in church service? So let's rent the drive-in movie theater. So we contacted them, and they were like, yeah, sure, we love the revenue. And I was thinking there's nothing wrong with doing a drive-in movie service. Well, word got leaked to the press. So the press ran several stories. We were on Fox, we were in New York Times. I was on all the local Bay Area stations, newspapers, San Jose Merc, SF Chronicle picked it up that we were doing drive-in church service. So Santa Clara County Health, Sarah Cody, put a ban on that. She was like, nope, not allowed to do a drive-in church service, not allowed to happen. And so we said, okay, well, what will you allow? Well, it's only essentials are allowed. Okay, we'll give away essentials. So this is 3 days before we would have Easter drive-in service. We had to change everything because they were like, no, we will not allow you to do this event. And so we figured out a way that we could do it. We had masks, we got groceries, we got toilet paper, because at the time nobody had toilet paper. So we went and through a shipping company got crates of single toilet paper. It was ridiculous, is what it was. And so we said, what can we do? Because we have a heart, not only, the mission of Southridge Church is leading people to find and follow Jesus. And so we said, hey, we still have to evangelize. And what better time than when people are in chaos and people are just feeling down. So we have our Easter service, and I'm going to have everybody park, and I'm going to preach from a flatbed truck on Easter Sunday. I had 8 San Jose police officers pull up. I had sheriff officers pull up. and then began to systematically, we had registered thousands of people. This thing went locally viral. We had 20,000 views. We had a little promo video. We had 20,000 views. People had seen it.
Wow.
We had thousands of people registered to show up for services. And then the police start rolling in, and now they start shutting things down. They said cars are not allowed to park. And so we were like, what do you mean cars can't park? We're spacing them out. Nobody's getting out of their cars. I'm using an FM transmitter.
Uh-huh.
So you couldn't hear anything outdoors unless you were standing right next to me. And officer after officer would just change things. And they said, well, it's not coming from me, it's coming from on top. And so I didn't know what was going on. So sure enough, something happened where what came down to is eventually we were going to do 6 or 7 services because we had that many cars at the theater that were wanting to be a part of our Easter services. And so so we were running all these services, and then they would come back and they said, you can't, the cars have to just drive through. So they wouldn't let them stop and park. So we said, let's put a pace car, and it's a huge parking lot, and let's make him snake his way through this parking lot. And I said, make it take 27 minutes, because that's how long the message is. So we had a pace car driving 2 miles per hour, so nobody stopped, and they're all listening on their FM transmitter, and it was ridiculous. And here's all these police cars, as there's real crimes happening all over, but here's 8 police cars rolling 2 officers per car. So I have 16 officers, sheriff showed up, everybody's showing up.
Huge expense.
Huge taxpayer expense for a church service on Easter Sunday. Okay, that overwhelmingly the community was for, the news was for, everybody thought this is a great, safe alternative to Easter Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Even the New York Times, everybody was positive about what we were doing because everybody was wearing masks. I mean, at that time it was like, yeah, we're still doing masks, gloves. We were trying to be a safe, we didn't know what this thing was.
Yeah.
And then the last service, the officer came to me and he said, hey, your worship team, they can't play. That's breaking some, they cited some rule that they're breaking some noise ordinance. And then our music guy said, well, do you have this special meter to read the decibels? Well, no, we just know it's too loud. Well, you can't arbitrarily it's in a movie theater, it's not a neighborhood. So that was his rule, so he said the band can't sing and worship, can't do that. So they stopped. And then before I gave him my last sermon, he said, oh, I just got word from on high that you're not allowed to preach anymore. And he said, now I do have to say, this is a violation of your First Amendment rights. Now, that was probably a harbinger for what we've seen now, a violation of First Amendment rights. Little did I know what a big, that COVID-19 was just going to be this used for this vehicle here in California just to stifle any speech that doesn't line up with the narrative that I see as a leftist, socialist, Marxist agenda. And so that's what we're seeing. And so that we went through that, and then the next week the police went, we had rented the theater again, we were going to do it again. This time the DA sent DA officers there, the same police were back, and then the theater, which was charging $1,000 a week, said, hey, I have to charge you $3,000 a week because the police are here. Yeah, so then it just, we don't have that kind of budget.
Yeah.
I can't pay $3,000 a week to run a parking lot for a couple hours. So then we did whatever we could. So we just went back to a high school, we started doing giveaways, and then I heard on May 31st, all the churches across California, led by the Calvary Chapel, were all going to open. There was something like, I think their goal was 3,000 churches, I think 1,800 churches officially said, we're going to reopen regardless on that day. So we decided, okay, on that day, we're going to find a parking lot, we're just going to do church. I don't care, officers show up. Officers did show up again, but by that time, the chief of police, Eddie Garcia, had said after Cinco de Mayo, he said, hey, I'm here for public safety, not for public health. We're not going to arrest anyone, we're not going to cite anybody. So where I had been cited before, twice before. So then we said, okay, we're going to keep being bold and into this. And then we got a hotel that was really hurting financially. They opened up their building to us for 4 Sundays. And then somebody caught us and everything. And so by that time, we have already joined a lawsuit against Sarah Cody, against Santa Clara County Health, against the governor. And so now it's kind of like wherever we went, we were being chased out. So we were told, oh, they said, you can't be here. We tried to go to the mall, couldn't be there. So we got kicked out of 3 different locations for church services. All the while, towards June, you see now the protests are taking off. Sarah Cody and the health department announced something that we see protests as your First Amendment right. And they tweeted that out while I'm trying to hold a church service which under the Constitution, it specifically states Congress shall not make any laws prohibiting the freedom of speech and religion. So here they are, they're picking and choosing, and there's discrimination. But it also brings me back to at the theater. The theater was allowed to open, and you could watch drive-in movies, but we were kicked out of the theater because they said you can't park and have a church service. But I could attend at night and watch a movie. And I said, what about the health concerns?
Double standard.
Double standard. So it goes back to this idea that some people think I'm paranoid when I say there's persecution in the church. No, there's absolutely persecution in the church. And so I think it's a time for the church to stand up, because as of right now, they're trying to put verbal pressure, and then they might show physical pressure, but they're not taking pastors to jail yet. They might write or cite a pastor, but there's nobody being hauled off to jail yet, because they know, I don't think America is ready to see pastors hauled off to jail yet. So I think they're waiting, but right now that's why you're seeing they're doing all this stuff to put pressure on guys to not open. And the sad thing is, most of the pressure is actually coming from other churches and other Christians that are afraid to go to church, that won't. And more every day, I can look at the statistics. I don't need to watch the news. I can go to our health department. They keep track of how many deaths, how many things, and I just stopped looking because it was so low.
Yeah.
In San Jose, in the Bay Area, you have a greater chance of dying in a car accident on the way to church than catching COVID and dying from it.
That's right.
But yet, we're not banning that. So for me, that was a long answer to a short question. How are we processing this? That's kind of how our mind is. And our church has just said, wait, we have a mission. That's the Great Commission, to preach the gospel. How do we carry that out? We're not just going to do that online. I feel like online church is like Netflix Fireplace.
Yeah.
Looks like heat,
Yeah.
sounds like heat, but it has no warmth.
Right.
When you come to an in-person church service, there the Holy Spirit is. There we can pray for one another. There we can practice the ordinances that make us a church. But then tonight I'll discuss it with our church, is we're called the ecclesia. That means called out. So why are these pastors saying stay in when we're to be called out? So it goes against what we are as the New Testament church, what Jesus Christ called us to be. And he said the gates of hell, Matthew 16:18, will not prevail against the church. So the church is always supposed to be advancing the gospel. And I hear from people, they're saying, well, Micaiah, I know why you want to do it in person. It's probably because your online numbers have dipped. My online numbers have gone up, not dipped. No, I believe that we're seeing, I believe suicide rate is up 861% across the nation. Gun sales are up, I looked it up today, up 151% over last year. So you're seeing huge gun sales. Last night alone, Chicago had 16 different shootings. A week ago, you saw a 5-year-old boy riding a bicycle in front of his house in North Carolina, and he was gunned down, shot in the head in front of his 2 sisters for no apparent reason. So you're seeing massive violence across the street and across the country. You're seeing people that are depressed. You're seeing opioid addiction. You're seeing the sale of alcohol and liquor and all these illegal drugs and substances are on the rise. And nobody can get any hope. People need answers. And the church is supposed to be able to say, hey, our doors are open. We have the answer. We have hope. We have the gospel. But yet what has happened is the church, because it jumped on a social gospel bandwagon, it said, hey, we're all about the social gospel. And we want people to like our church. So we're going to do what the media wants us to do so they like us. The only problem is Jesus never said that they were going to like you. As a matter of fact, he even said, hey, it'll be like brother against brother, which is what you're seeing. I have family members in my church who say, hey, yeah, my spouse is upset that I go to church, or a relative's upset that I go to in-person service. So our church is just trying to biblically walk our church through. So that's what we're studying the book of Acts. We're just going through the book of Acts. What did the early church do? Because they faced persecution, they faced jail sentences, they faced death, they faced it all. And so that's what we're called to. And so just reminding our church of, hey, let's go back to what the early church went through. And so just seeing that has been kind of encouraging for our church people, because now they actually feel like their faith means something. Because we have a generation that we said, hey, come as you are, stay as you are. We want church to be all about you. It's the inverted gospel. It's not me take up my cross and follow Jesus. The inverted gospel is Jesus, come follow me and bless me and meet all my needs. It's the inverted gospel that we've seen preached. And so now we as churches need to stand up and reteach and retrain our people what is the true gospel of Jesus Christ. You see, we as Christians, to quote what John MacArthur said, we are to hold back the corruption that's in this world. Okay, we're salt and light, and salt holds back corruption. But right now, Christians are like, I don't want to hold it back. I want you to like me.